Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar. It's with great pleasure that I'm welcoming again this week Tom McMahon from MCM. Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom, for coming along. What's really exciting actually about having Tom along is that hopefully now we can get kind of two sides of the equation here and in how we can discuss with you various topics. Today we're very much talking about landing page optimization and making sure that when someone actually comes to your website that they do the intended thing. And obviously from our side being the website provider, that's very important that we obviously want the website to be working well for you. But especially from a pay-per-click point of view with regards to Tom. I mean, it's absolutely crucial, and obviously Tom will go into this in a lot more detail, and we'll have some discussion on this too, that when a campaign, whatever campaign it might be, whether it be paid or social, et cetera, is driving people to a website, that when they come onto the page in which they're landing onto, i.e. the term landing page, that it gives someone what they need. It's not a surprise, it provides information, and they can easily do what they want to do. Before we actually get kicked off, I just thought I'd discuss what actually a landing page is, because sometimes people get a bit confused as you know, what is a landing page? Well, fundamentally, it's a page onto your website in which you come to from a particular destination. So it can be from many destinations. Let's say you've sent out an email campaign, click on the link, go through to your website. That is the landing page from the email campaign. Same with social. Obviously, same with pay-per-click. Now, those are relatively well defined, and you can absolutely set up exactly which page you're going to and with regards to that. But also, you shouldn't forget that when it comes to SEO, search engine optimization, from Google search results, if someone clicks in your event, page comes up, click on that, go through to that page. That in essence is a landing page too. So if, for example, you have a particular keyword that is working really well in Google search, that lots of people are finding, they're clicking on that, you have to bear in mind that that too is a landing page, and you have to think about what that person is looking for when they come to your site, and are you giving it to them? But without going too much into depth as to what landing pages are, etc., etc. The first part of the webinar is going to be with Tom, and he's going to cover a lot of things in relation to the pay-per-click side of things. So just hand over to you, Tom.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, John, and thanks very much for having me back to do another one of these sessions.
Our pleasure.
Hopefully that means that the first one wasn't too bad, which is always good news. So, and good afternoon to everyone else that have joined. So thank you very much for joining. So hopefully there's going to be lots of bite-sized and useful insights that are going to come out of this afternoon's session. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Cool. So hopefully everyone can see that all good. So just as a really quick reintroduction to me, so I'm Tom, I'm the CEO at MCM. And MCM is an event specialist digital marketing agency. So as John mentioned, a huge amount of what we do is PPC and paid social and all of the advertising for various different events. So as I've covered off there, an event specialist digital marketing agency. The main focus being getting bums on seats. So how can we find your audiences and drive them through to convert into a ticket? So again, referencing John's kind of introduction there, I think that we've got the easy bit as the kind of advertisers and PPC. We know the strategy of getting the right messages in front of the right people at the right time to get them through and then ultimately convert. But we can only control everything up to people leaving the social platform, leaving Google and clicking through. So we could do the best job in the world at driving people through. If the page that they're ultimately then going to land on isn't as strong as it can possibly be, isn't optimized, isn't in line with the wider strategy that's been in place so far, as you can imagine, that could be really problematic, and it can undo a lot of the brilliant work that's been done. So yeah, I think John and the team have a big challenge in terms of making sure those landing pages are brilliant, and yourselves as event marketers making sure that that kind of final stumbling block can be as slick and smooth as it can possibly be. So the focus for today is to work out how we can really nail those on-site conversion journeys to effectively supercharge the return on investment. So let's say you've done a huge amount of work finding these new audiences, re-engaging audiences that have attended before. You've taken them through the campaign. How are you making sure that all of that work is paying off? Because you've done the majority, you've done the tough, the tough bit of bringing people through. How are you getting them to make that final conversion? So if we look at the two scenarios and what we're trying to ultimately fix here, worst case scenario you've got at the top. So this is where you're doing a huge amount of work to drive traffic over to your site. And that could just be a huge amount of work in terms of organic advertising, or that could be paid advertising where you're actually paying to get these people onto the site. And the absolute worst case is that you're getting people bouncing off because they're reaching the landing page. The landing page is confusing, it's not loading properly, any of these issues, and they're leaving, which is such a shame because as you see, you've done all of this work to drive people there, and then they bounce straight away. Best case scenario is making sure that offsite conversion journey before people are reaching the landing pages is tailored. So you've got an awareness, consideration, and conversion phase. So you're taking people on that journey so that they're not just jumping and landing straight onto the page cold, and it's a bit confusing, it's a bit sudden. They've seen some content, they know why they should be attending the event, they're really kind of primed and ready to convert. And A/B testing running throughout, working out what's working offsite to make your campaign as strong as it can be, so that when they then land on site, they're all ready to go. And then you've done all of that brilliant work on the landing pages, as John will cover off in a little bit more detail in the second half of how can we make sure that when people are there after all of that investment, they're really ready to go through, convert, and buy a ticket, register interest, inquire to exhibit, whatever it might be.
I'll just ask you a quick question there, Tom.
Yeah.
Not sure if you're going to cover it in a bit, but have you got any sense as to kind of what the cost can be of having, that immediate bounce? I mean, I can imagine that's pretty expensive in some cases.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think in terms of cost, it can be 100% of what you've put in. We've seen some, horror stories of where the landing page doesn't work, or it's been, really, really problematic, or it's really slow, or things are broken or not optimized, and you could have spent X thousands of pounds on an advertising campaign, and then when people are landed there and it's not slick, it's not sorted, that loss can be massive. And then working back from that absolute worst case where it just simply, you can't convert the traffic, it's really going to impact the efficiency of that conversion if people are struggling to convert when they're landing there.
I mean, the other thing I'll just quickly add in there is often what people also don't factor in is the actual cost of the website itself that they've invested in the first place. So it's in addition to that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. When you add up all of the costs, so if you were to put in the advertising costs, the website costs, and then the time and effort that's gone into it, massive load of investment when a couple of just really simple bits can kind of let you down and the whole thing can fall apart. I guess it's like that analogy of a chain's only as strong as the weakest link. That is very much the case with a landing page, and you could argue that the landing page is the most important link. If that doesn't work, you're really going to struggle. So I guess covering off that in a little bit more detail, I think this is the most important bit we've got in here. Doesn't matter how strong your marketing is, we can advise you could build the best marketing campaign in the world. If the landing page isn't strong, the conversions are not going to be anywhere near as strong as they can be. So it's the foundation, it's the real important bit to make sure that is covered off and as effective as possible. So let's jump into some common mistakes. I don't think there's anything in here that is groundbreaking or reinvents the wheel, but we work across 400 or 500 different events each year, and these are the things that we still see time and time again. So it's the really good ones to just triple check and make sure are all in order ahead of going live, ahead of running activity. As early as you possibly can out from event, making sure these bits are sorted. So the first one is loading time. So the slower your website loads, the lower your conversion rate is going to be. So you've done all this lovely work to get people through to the site. Again, it's going to be super simple. If it takes ages to load, then that is really going to impact the conversions that are coming through. There's more chance that people are going to bounce and go elsewhere. So it's really good there's lots of free tools where you can have a look at exactly what the loading time is on the page. I'd also recommend taking your page, dropping it into ChatGPT and asking for tips on how to improve the loading time. What are some of the bits that can be done there? Lots of things around compressing images, or making sure everything's set up in the best possible way as needed. But yeah, improving the loading time is huge.
Just to jump in quickly there, because obviously we are the website. So the things that we find really, really slow up pages are video, images, which are far, far, far too big. Whilst we do scale down the images, there's only so much we can do. So if they start off 30 times bigger than they should be in the first place, there's only so much we can do to reduce down the file size. So that'll be another one. Too many widgets on the page with libraries and modules loading other things in. It's basically just too much stuff on the page. As part of the post webinar follow-up, we have some various articles. So for those of you who have ASP websites, we have some various articles on how to make sure that your page is fast with regards to particular file types for video, how to compress images, and other best practices regarding widgets and everything else. So we can send that out afterwards, and that all has an enormous impact actually in terms of the page speed. But thanks for raising that one, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, John. And yeah, can you make sure you send that to me? Because even as I'm looking at this and thinking, yeah, I know that our homepage could be a lot faster on our own site as well. So definitely one for us to look at. So a couple of other bits to mention as well, quite quick ones. So below the fold is something that we find it can be a bit of an issue, again, when people are landing on the site as they've gone through that conversion journey, making sure as much of the key information is basically on screen when you land. So, whether it be on mobile, as soon as you get there, making sure that the relevant information about the event is there, and on desktop is really important. And John, I'm sure you probably want to jump in and add a couple of points on that one as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we'll actually be covering this on my slides on what key info you need to have above the fold, and also what isn't then hidden below the fold. And it's also very worth bearing in mind how most people see your website. Is it on desktop if you're very B2B? But even if you are B2B, don't assume that everyone is on desktop, because depending on the industry, you do get some industries in which a very high proportion actually do use mobile first. So have a little trip into Google Analytics, see who uses, what devices use your website, so you can actually see where this magical fold is, and then to see what's appearing above and what's below. And the number of times I've seen kind of key call to action buttons, where the event is, what the event's called, all sorts of weird and wonderful things below the fold. That's an absolutely critical error which kind of needs to be fixed. So yeah, the fold is everything.
Yeah, and again, from our perspective, when we're thinking about the users that we've taken on this journey from social platforms to a site, these social platforms are built to be incredibly engaging. Every single bit of it is spot on, is perfect to hook people in. We need to make sure that as they're leaving that really curated journey of really succinct and nicely designed information, that then when they're landing on site, that similar kind of thought has gone into that landing page.
100%.
Cool. And then the next one that's super important is context. So from the digital marketing side of things, pre-landing on the site, we spend so much time building that strategy, building the journey, working out what are the first messages that we're going to put in front of people at the awareness stage, how we're going to take them through the consideration phase with more reasons to attend, then the conversion phase, and all of this bespoke creative and lovely different lines of copy, etc. And sometimes it can be a real shame when all of that work has been done. Let's say an event has built this lovely, visual imagery and styling and brand guidelines, and then suddenly you reach the landing page and it's all gone, and it feels like a different world or a different planet, and you think, well, what's happened there? And that can happen vice versa as well, where you let's say a campaign where the advertising's been particularly generic and stuff, or hasn't been, and then you arrive at the landing page and it's brilliant and it's got a very distinct style and it feels quite strange. That that can be quite disruptive. We've got a little bit more info on that in a second as well, but yeah, it's really important to share that context, make it feel really fluid throughout, and then once you're on that page, being really clear around what are the next steps and what can you expect, etc.
I'll just ask, do you have any best practice when you're working with clients, Tom, and just thinking about that journey from when they first see the advert and whatever platform it might be on, taking it all the way through to the actual landing page? Because the problem is, I know when I've worked with other PPC agencies in the past, the whole concept of a PPC campaign or a social campaign can get a bit obscure because you have all these platforms and these spreadsheets. How do you find it kind of making sure, and working with clients to make sure that journey all kind of stacks up? Do you find it's best if you kind of if clients get really involved and really kind of almost, sort of really define where that journey should be going to? How do you find it works best?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one that, it's great to be as involved as possible with the clients that we're working with, or even, if people are running it themselves. I would really recommend splitting out each phase, so the awareness, consideration, and conversion phase. First of all, thinking about which platforms are going to work best for each in terms of raising awareness, consideration, conversion, and then identifying the think, feel, and do for every ad or every bit of promotion that you're going to do. So let's say 3 months out, you're creating a simple ad that's going to run for a few weeks or a month. When people see it, what do you want them to think? How do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? And that is going to be very different in that final stage of the campaign. The think, feel, and do is going to be very different. You might want them to think at that final stage, oh no, I'm missing out. Feel that, okay, everyone's going and I haven't signed up yet. The do is convert. Compared to the awareness stage, the think, feel, do, the think might be, oh, I haven't heard about that event before. That seems quite interesting. The feel could be intrigued, and the do could be do a bit more research on the event or something. And by tailoring the messaging and the thinking and the creative and the copy and the use of platform at each of those stages can just really help prime those audiences so that at the end of that conversion funnel, they're as primed as possible when they reach the landing page.
Oh, fantastic. I've just had a question from the floor, if you don't mind. It kind of links in with that a little bit. Should you use the same images or video on your PPC campaign ads and then on the landing page to create some visual continuity or consistency, or does it not matter?
Great question. I would say the use of the same imagery throughout it wouldn't be needed. So I'd say no. However, the branding and the overall look and feel, keeping some similarity in that throughout is brilliant. So obviously you've got your logo, but use of font, use of color, even photography style, video style, keeping that as consistent as possible throughout can really help avoid the kind of visual jolt. I've got a slide on that in a second actually, but we can cover that off now. But that is exactly it, trying to keep some kind of narrative and some kind of path through all, because if you imagine people are seeing, 1,000, 2,000 adverts each day. And you're ideally, if you're running an advertising campaign, looking to convert someone with a frequency of maybe 10, 15, if you're lucky. So you've got about 10 or 15 ads to put in front of them. You want every single one of those ads to feel like it's coming from you. So you're reaching that frequency. If they all feel like they're coming from someone else, it's going to get lost and you're not going to build that recognition through to conversion.
That's it.
Nice. So generic approach pre-landing page. I think I've covered that off in a bit more detail here, but it's just so important to take people through that awareness, consideration, conversion, so that they're primed. If you're running, again, if we go back to the use of imagery, photography, or using different ones, in the same breath, what you don't want to do is use the same asset, the same image of the event and a logo throughout the whole campaign, because that you're not going to have any learnings on what other assets could have performed better, and it isn't going to be the most effective way of taking people through that whole approach. So tailoring what you want to say at each stage is going to be super effective. The visual jolt. So that's what I was coming onto there, and that's exactly it. Where you've used all of this lovely imagery in different styles. You don't want that to change, and when people reach the landing page, feel like, where am I? How have I ended up here? And this feels completely different to where I was before. So, really important to bring some form of contingency throughout. And so, it's definitely one to consider. And then mobile optimized. So I've mentioned this one because it's one we see time and time again. I'm sure, John, you'll be able to talk to this in a bit more detail as well, but it's one that we find could just be so tricky when you're running all of this brilliant advertising or PPC, paid social, etc. The majority of the people are going to be on mobile, regardless of audience, regardless of B2B, B2C, whatever, they're going to be on mobile. So just making sure that when people land, that it's set up in the best possible way.
Yeah, we had a client who it's a it's relating to logistics and haulage, and a lot of lorry drivers basically go to the event, and the client wasn't aware, but almost 95% of their traffic was all on mobile device, and all of the design was based whilst in the office working on the desktop. So funny enough, the conversions were awful because it just was not designed for mobile.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one when you hear it, because I think regardless of audience, you just always need to have a really strong mobile presence, because the majority of the time it's going to be the majority of the audience access on mobile. There might be some fluctuation between maybe 60-40 in terms of mobile desktop, all the way through to 95-5 mobile desktop. So it's just one of those essentials, isn't it? So a couple of considerations just to cover off quick, and then I'm going to hand over to John to go through in a bit more detail things to do on the site. Things for us, so tracking. So it's really important whenever setting up the landing pages to ensure that you're putting tracking in place right from the beginning, and avoiding, where possible, altering or making any significant changes to that page without also updating the tracking. So that tracking might be the pixel that is powering retargeting if you're running paid advertising across Meta or whatever it might be. It could be your Google tracking, etc. But this is something that is one of the best ways to improve efficiency and return investment from any advertising spend. And if the tracking is put in place late, if it's not put in place correctly, you're missing such a huge opportunity to effectively bring your costs down for free and get more people to your site at a lower cost. So it's super important to get that tracking in place as soon as possible. If anyone needs any support on setting up tracking, always welcome to reach out to us at any point, and I'm sure John and the team can advise on some of those bits as well of how to set it up in the best way. The next one is timing. So as mentioned, lots of bits in there, none of them super groundbreaking, but implementing all of these things at the absolute last minute when there's 1,000 other things to do on an event can be a real challenge, and it can mean that things get missed. Often things like tracking that could get rushed and added on at the last minute, and you've suddenly lost out on all of this opportunity to build a large retargeting audience. Also, by setting up these landing pages at a late phase might mean that Google can't start to rank them and look at the health of them. Appreciate that can be a super busy environment when your event is approaching, but the more you can get ahead of things and get those pages up and running as early as possible and built into some form of activity, the better.
I'll just say something on that one, Tom. So I joined the events industry about 3 years ago. Prior to that, did a lot of stuff outside of events, and was surprised on events websites how much of the website is kind of scrubbed after the event. So therefore, when you're looking forward to the next event, there's so much of the stuff you kind of have to do again, which obviously requires work, whether it be landing pages or anything else. And certainly how I worked and saw other businesses work in the past is that you would learn on an ongoing basis. So if you had a particular page which was a landing page for a certain campaign, you'd be constantly looking at that and refining it. And and gradually get better and better over time. But certainly what I see in events is that there's this, as Thomas just mentioned there in regards to timing, that sometimes it's left too late to get the landing pages up and set things up properly, so they're subpar initially. The event happens, and then a lot of these pages are then got rid of, or the site's refreshed and they're lost then. So it then rinses and repeats the next year of not enough time to set it up, not properly thought through. Just another way to consider would be instead start a little bit earlier to set them up in year one, and then for year two, make sure you keep them all live. And irrespective of, people sometimes move teams, I understand that, but try and keep these pages live so we can then learn from one year to another. And between, if you have multiple events within your company, and try to learn between one landing page and another, because honestly, percentage points can make a big difference in terms of conversions, the return on investment, the amount of money that you make as a direct result of these. And so much of this does actually, and if you can avoid repeated work or wasted work, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's use what was working well last year and was refined last year and build on that this year. So it slightly went aside on there, Tom, but it just seemed appropriate while you were talking about timing.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's also still so much opportunity to build on last year's pages without redoing them. So you can still change, you can still move things around without having to just kind of delete and go again. So, and it's completely in line with Google's best practice as well, is to build these, these products and these bases year on year to make them stronger and stronger, and effectively means you have to do less work to get people on them and converting.
So it means less work next year, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the other one, a bit of a boring admin one, but it's so important to have your cookie policy in place and ensure that the page is GDPR compliant as well. And the reason I mention this is, again, we see it every now and then, and that the cookie tool, the cookie policy might not be in place. And we think, from our side, all of this brilliant work that's gone on, and then people are added there, and it's these issues that you think, so much work and investment has happened. People are going here, and then this is disrupting things. So, that's definitely one that's good to kind of, from a hygiene perspective, make sure it's in place. And the policies around this are only getting stricter year on year, and it can be quite bad and quite scary, the implications of not getting these bits properly sorted. So that's a really good one to just triple check with your a trusted source around making sure that all of that is all good.
Also, if it's not in place, I've certainly noticed on the tracking that you just cannot get all the. So, for example, I've certainly seen where you have the third-party registration form where there's no cookie consent on there, and Google Tag Manager actually stops a lot of the data getting back, so it stops your tracking, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, exactly that. So it means that all of the work that's been done in the awareness phase, or whatever it might be, is getting completely lost and wasted. So yeah. And then the final one for me to mention is just a bit of a buzzword of the moment, I guess. We talked about the importance of keeping those landing pages going from an SEO perspective. So obviously SEO stands for search engine optimization, meaning that when people are searching, your site's going to come up quicker. But what we're doing and thinking a lot more about is generative engine optimization. So how you can make your sites come up in things like ChatGPT, for example, or any of the other AI-powered large language models, because the world of search is changing, and it's changing super quick. Google is no longer the only player. So it's how can you make sure that those sites are as rich and have as much useful information in them, so that they're also starting to show up in those other AI tools, which is super, super important. So the rules don't really change. And John, I'm sure you can talk to this in a bit more detail as well, but the principles with optimizing sites for generative engines is the same as with search engines. It's just good quality content written by people that adds values and answers the questions that people are asking. But again, a really good one to think about, especially as we look at what is that landscape going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years times? Where someone's searching, okay, what is the best accountancy event? How are you making sure that your landing pages and your site are the ones that are coming up?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we certainly do a lot on that. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you type something into ChatGPT, what is it that you get out the bottom? You get reams of text. So what is it, obviously, therefore, that ChatGPT is looking for? It's looking for source information that it can be fed, and which it can therefore give a really good answer. So if someone says, what is XYZ event about? And you go onto that website and there's no actual information on that website of what it is about. Well, obviously ChatGPT, Google, Bing, anything else has no information to go on. So if you, all they're really pushing towards is making your website as useful as possible. And we certainly are big fans of frequently asked questions and making sure that your website has all of those really basic questions on there. This is landing pages, we're not going off topic. The landing pages have all those really basic standard questions who someone who knows nothing about your event whatsoever might ask. Where is it? What time is it? Who's speaking? What will I learn? Can I do networking? You know, all of those sorts of things. And this very much feeds into ChatGPT, the latest generative models, and ultimately it's just trying to make your website as useful as possible. But no, brilliant point there, Tom. Thanks.
Exactly, and as you say, it is slightly outside the strict landing pages, but it helps that whole kind of ecosystem, doesn't it? And that's why I think the tool that you guys have recently launched around transcribing the speaker notes into blog articles, that is just the perfect way of optimizing for these generative models, because it's real insights from real people that are then being added on. So yeah, I think that's the dream approach. I would definitely recommend a lot of people looking into how they can get more out of that content and onto their sites.
Thanks for the shout out.
No worries. So that's the final one from me. I mentioned in here the power of A/B testing. I thought all of these slides will come over so you can grab these at any time, but I always like to leave a little freebie. So there's a little book around A/B testing if anyone wants to have a look at that, because that can be also a super useful tool and a principle for when working on landing pages. So
that's it. No, that's amazing. Thank you, Tom.
Share my screen and hand over to you, John.
Fantastic. If anyone's got any questions for Tom, please fire them in while we've got him, so we can answer those through. But now I'm going to chat through, obviously Tom has spoken through what happened before you come onto the website. It's now, let's have a chat about what happens when you get onto the website. So I'm going to split this up. I've got some slides. I've got a little bit of a cheat sheet here, which can certainly share with everyone afterwards, with some kind of best practice on there. And a lot of these things, you'll probably look at them, and as I talk them through, think, well, this is really obvious stuff. But you know, Tom mentioned that they work on, you know, sort of 500 odd events around year on year. We've got about 700 that we work on, and you would not believe the number of websites that I go onto where some of the real basics are just not there. And it's easily done. You know, it's that the old saying, you know, you can't see the wood through the trees, and you're so busy, and we'll appreciate everyone's busy and doing what they're doing. And sometimes really obvious things do get missed. And I think, just kind of echoing what Tom said a little bit earlier about timing, things are less likely to get missed if you maybe start the landing page a bit earlier in the events cycle, and possibly also, like I said before, if you can keep a landing page from last year and then sort of look at that and then see how that can be improved. There's no need to reinvent the wheel here. To be frank, there's nothing particularly revolutionary when it comes to a lot of these landing pages, but we'll certainly walk through all of the different elements here. And they're all things that might seem so obvious, but they really should be on the page. Now, it's also worth bearing in mind that we can't cover every type of landing page here, because there's many types of adverts, there's many types of social campaigns, email campaigns, which will be driving people to your website. So I'm just using an example of kind of a homepage here and some key elements on there. So just translate this to the application in which you are and where you're driving people from and to. So in this particular example, maybe it's an ad about kind of brand building, or maybe it's an ad for kind of sustainable tech, tech shows, that type of thing. But this page certainly won't be applicable for all forms of adverts. And Tom mentioned before about context, and so therefore potentially you'll need a number of landing pages. But if we talk through some of the principles here, hopefully that will make things a little bit clearer. So we just look at so here we're looking at above the fold. Tom spoke about the fold before. Depending on the device in which you're looking at, whether it's mobile or desktop, will depend on where your fold is. For those who don't know, this comes from old newspaper jargon, where you'd obviously fold the newspaper and then read it. So the stuff that you would read would generally be above the bit that you folded, but this has now found its way into the web world. So it's everything that you can see when you first go onto a website, whether it be on your mobile or on your desktop. And like I mentioned before, if you're not sure of that, if you take a little dive into Google Analytics, have a quick look over there, look at the tech in which people are using, and it's really empowering to know, what devices people are. And like Tom also said, it always, to be honest, needs to look good on mobile. So I don't think there's ever really a real justification for a website that doesn't look good on mobile. But it's certainly empowering to go and look at Google Analytics to see where the majority of the traffic is coming from. So if we look at this fictitious website here above the fold, obviously one of the key things here is, what's your call to action is. We've got call to action at the top, which will remain sticky, but surely we want to know we've come to the first place, don't we? We've come to the right place. So this is a sustainable tech show. So obviously we want to have your business name and what you're about. Now, I cannot tell you the number of websites to go on to where this primary headline, it sounds all very nice, but it's not specific, and it doesn't talk about what your website is actually, what your event is actually about. And that's so important. Unfortunately, it may not seem that creative, but people only have a very short attention span. I think you'd be lucky if you get more than three seconds out of people. If you don't give them what they're looking to expect, then they will hit that back button and your campaigns will not work properly. So this main headline, which you have at the top, is so important. And so often, like I've said, it's really nothing particularly revolutionary or creative. It's just saying who what you do, what type of event are you? And then obviously we've got here what dates and where. And again, there have been numerous shows I've looked at and events I've looked at where actually starting to struggle to find out when is it, where is it. Obviously, it's absolutely crucial information, and it would suggest that it's very, very high up and something for people to see immediately, because it'll be this kind of information which will be on the ads which you had beforehand. So obviously this is part of this visual connection and that journey that people are having. And so when they come on here, yep, I'm in the right place, fine, let's now scroll down and get some more information. Nice, vibrant image or video. Like I've spoken before, very heavy videos in terms of file size or images can slow the page down, which is what we don't want. But on the other hand, we do want something which is highly engaging, really kind of sells people into the event. So it's that kind of fine line between kind of the, giving this really rich information and, that real visual excitement about the web page and slowing it down too much. A little bit of trial and error sometimes works well here. Some people ask, is a video better? Are images better? Are slideshows better? I don't think there is, we have certain trends. A lot of people are certainly using video very, very effectively at the moment, but we have to make sure it's quite a short loop, so you get all the information that you have in without the file being too big. I think it really depends how it's executed rather than what you use. So an extremely good image, which shows exactly what the event's about, could work better than a video that isn't well executed, or a very well executed and a slideshow with 2 or 3 images that very, very clearly, again, show the event and the key things that you want people to do or information you want people to have. It's all about the thought that has got into it. So I wouldn't personally get hung up on, is video better or is this image better? Is think of what key information do you want to portray over? What are the key interests of your visitors? And if it was in this fictitious expo here, is it drones and 5G? If it is, we've done the right job. If no one's interested in drones and 5G, well, we've done a bad job here, haven't we? Because I'd glance at that, think I'm in the wrong place, and I'd hit the back button. So other, I think, key elements up here are the register now button, or obviously the words you use will obviously depend very much on what you want people to do, whether it's buying a ticket. But the key thing is we have a very, very bold main call to action button at the top. Just to note that visual contrast is very important. So you can see the yellow on the kind of greenish background. There's a lot of contrast there. You're not going to miss it. And another thing to bear in mind, and I've said this on webinars before, is that if you have a primary call to action, which in this particular example we've chosen as the register now, you have that as one color, consistent throughout the site. It's the color with the greatest contrast. And sometimes people get that right, but then where they go wrong is they then start adding other buttons in for going to see the speakers or to the exhibitor page or wherever else, and they add that in as the same color as the register now button, which unfortunately it then dilutes the power of the main call to action button. So make sure that your primary call to action has its own unique color. Nothing else kind of competes with it. And in this particular example, you'd want it, especially on mobile, you'd want it sticky. So at the top here, as you scroll up the page, you've got register now, which is there looking at you all the time, and there's no hiding from it. So we've got our primary call to action. As we start to work our way down, you always have to remember also is that not everyone would necessarily know about your event. So we want to start building in things in which are going to build trust and build confidence in your event. And as we start to work our way down, we can see that there's many ways of doing this. These are certainly not the only ways, and some things may be more applicable to others. But I guess the key question is, when you're thinking about your audience, what sort of things are going to entice people to come to your event? Is it the industry leaders who are going to be there? So therefore, in this example, if we had logos of very prominent companies, could it be some headline speakers that you have there? Could it be that you're the largest event around, and so therefore the numbers that you have, number of attendees, or the countries represented, or number of exhibitors, etc., is maybe that's a unique factor. Maybe you have lots and lots of amazing testimonials from visitors, from exhibitors, etc. Maybe that's one way of showing trust, sort of building trust and social proof in your event. But the key thing here is to understand your audience, understand what they're looking for in an event like this, and then this can then start to put in the kind of sort of social signals here that you should be putting. So just because put industry leader logos here on this template, that may not be right for your event. Maybe people are actually coming for the speakers, and maybe it's the people's names that's most important. I don't know. It will all depend on your particular event and your understanding of your audience. One thing I would say is that testimonials, and especially when you have the people's name and who they work for, can never go amiss, really, because real words from real people. At the end of the day, people want to know, is it worth my time and investment in time to come along? And the more words that you can say, which kind of reinforces that, depending. So I mean, if you're looking for visitors on this landing page, you've got visitor testimonials. If there's a landing page to sign up exhibitors to come, and you're looking to sell floor space, obviously we're looking for testimonials from exhibitors on that example. But all very much depends on your audience and the people you're sending to this page. We also, at this point, we've kind of gained some trust here. So just imagine people are now coming down the page. And you now have to start to kind of earn the right and give people a bit more information. Certainly you've given enough information so far that people want to scroll down a little bit. And also remember that a lot of these people may not have been to your event before, or maybe it was a few years ago, so they can't really remember. Maybe you introduced new features, new things happening that weren't there last year or the year before. So just think on the real basic terms. Why would people want to come? Biggest event, insights from industry leaders. I know CPD accreditation is quite a major thing across many industries, and should be made in some cases actually. The CPD is almost in a couple of conferences I've certainly worked on. It's almost everything, and if that was the case on this particular event, I'd probably put the CPD really near the top. But again, this comes down to the understanding of your audience and what people are looking for. I've put down here, the principle here, and I put another register now button, is that it should never really be that far from these primary calls to action. So it doesn't have to be over the top, don't have to put them everywhere, but just pepper them around the website. So people are never that far. And it's also not a bad idea. Also, we put down here as to a bit of a reason why to register now. And obviously that's going to be different for everyone. But in this particular example, to get your free visitor badge for 2 days of insight and innovation. So just a very short reason as to why someone should register now, just that little nudge to kind of remind them. Again, we want a little bit more information about the event. And in this particular case, we've spoken about speakers and stages. We're mentioning about the different topics that are being discussed. AI, automation, sustainability in this particular event. We speak about live recordings, workshops, all sorts of things. Obviously, this will be very much dependent on your event and what you have on. But try in a very concise and easily digestible format to make sure that you have all of the information about the event. But again, I think the design and the layout is important. Remember that people don't want to read big reams of text, so bullet points, break it up with images. Again, you can break things up with these buttons. There's lots and lots of ways, obviously, in which you can do that. So yes, have this information on here. Be mindful that it's not too wordy, and visually try and break up the page a little bit too. We've got event details down here, where it is. You can click and add it to your calendar quite easily. What times the doors open, the venue. Might seem really obvious, and I keep saying this, but you would not believe the number of event websites I've been onto and just finding out when, dates, location. You'd be surprised. Tom mentioned earlier about optimizing for ChatGPT and the various other models, etc., etc. Now, you might think, why is this relevant to a landing page? If you're just sending people from say PPC, well, whilst it has the kind of double benefit of optimizing for these other pages, I never like putting anything on a page unless it adds real, genuine value to the visitor. So whilst above here, we've kind of bullet pointed and given those kind of top line reasons as to why you should come to the event, we haven't really given an awful lot of kind of meaty detail, really. So as you work your way down, we certainly find the FAQs, and if you put them into accordions like this, we press the plus button and it expands out. You can start to put some quite detailed information about the event, and we do find, and we've done testing on this, that people do scroll down, people do read these, and especially when you really know your audience, you're speaking in their language, and you're thinking about the questions that they might be asking. So, I mean, we have cases where we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 FAQs at the bottom, and people do read them. So this certainly is not just done for the search engines, for PPs, for Google, for whilst it certainly helps with these campaigns, this is very much done for people and adding really valuable information. So on a landing page in 2025, FAQs can work really well. Other things that we can put on to this page, obviously you can't put everything on one landing page, and maybe people want to just further explore a little bit, whilst obviously we want to try our best to get people to register now, without having to go elsewhere. People may want to also navigate elsewhere, see the agenda, who's speaking, who all the exhibitors are, get your free badge if that's one of the options. So within a page, there should always be lots of links through to other useful bits of the website, just in case they want to get more information, because maybe, even having come to an amazingly designed landing page, there is still not quite enough for them to be able to make the decision. I always like to remind people as to what the event is and when it is. You can't be, as people are flicking through, you don't want them to keep having to hit the back button to remind themselves exactly what the date is. So if you have that peppered through the site and where it is, that's a good thing to do. Other trust signals, this will very much depend on your industry and what kind of things your audience might be looking for. But whether the site is safe and secure, whether it's hack proof. We've had clients where people try and hack their sites, but the logos like this or GDPR compliant, very much depending on your industry, it will depend on the logos that you should be putting on here, just to add a little bit more trust to the website. Because remember, there could be people coming on here who don't actually know your event and maybe haven't been there before. I put the kind of chat bot icon at the bottom because also, again, depends on your industry, but there might be people who want to get in touch straight away, who may have certain questions that they might want to ask. And I can't say whether your industry this is right or not, but it's certainly worth thinking, is this something that your audience would value? And it's certainly something, because a lot of the solutions nowadays are relatively cost effective. It's certainly something that would be worth trying. Maybe a bit out from the event, but why does this relate to a landing page? Well, basically a landing page is trying to answer someone's questions, to give them all the information they need to then just hit register now. And maybe on your event, maybe your audience is actually looking to engage a little bit with a chatbot to get some questions answered before they then hit register now. I don't know, but it's certainly something which is worth testing.
John, I had a really quick question on the chatbot actually. What are your thoughts on the chatbots, especially on mobile, that automatically open and in the kind of the bottom third of the page with someone ready to type? What are your thoughts on those? Do you see it? Do you think good, not so good? What do you reckon?
Well, my personal opinion and my test and my kind of professionally, it would always say we'll test them, A/B test them, see how they work. Now, from what I've read and from what I've heard, things which are quite obtrusive, especially in the UK, don't generally have such good interaction, because it's seen as a bit pushy. And it will also, I think there's some quite visual details that go into it as well. On top of what it's appearing above, on top of, how does it look? Do you have a choice of interacting with it, or is it trying to push information onto you? I think the real devil in the detail actually in that, and how it looks. So if, for example, you've scrolled pretty much down to the bottom, it then pops up with a gentle message and says, still haven't found what you're looking for, why not ask us a question? To me, that'll go, oh, that's quite cool, let's type in a question. If it's the second you're on the page, pops up 5 big messages, register now, special offer, you think, oh, a little bit shouty. So I think with a lot of these things, it depends very much in the detail of the implementation. And if in doubt, also test it as well. See, try different routes and see if one instills more engagement and kind of fundamentally registrations or what you're ever trying to achieve than another one. But yeah, fantastic. Have you had any particular experience on those, Tom?
No, not really, only from a user perspective. And yeah, I was just interested in your things. I'm the same. I think similar answer in terms of it's always good to test it, and I think I'd always be performance led. But I think that's a really good point in terms of ultimately it comes down to how well it's executed.
Yeah, 100%. Kind of wrapping up a little bit here. I've just got some, at the bottom of this slide, I think there's just some best practices, and we've pretty much spoken about these. Mobile first. I mean, some really basic things which often get overlooked, but is very much in the design is, make sure your text is big enough, so people can easily read text on mobile. Make sure there's plenty of contrast. So much of it is about the kind of the visual presentation, how easy it is for someone to easily digest and read the information, because you could have done everything that I've done up here, done a fantastic job on that, and Tom could have done some amazing campaigns driving people to the site. But if the text is too small and you can't really read it, that in itself can cause major issues. And then there's all sorts of kind of techniques or tactics that you can use when people come to the website to try and convert. And hopefully within your industry, you kind of and within your events, you kind of tested this and seen which works better or not. So, for example, the old countdown, early bird offers, whatever it might be, these certainly can all work in certain circumstances. Certainly aren't applicable to all, and I would certainly recommend testing. Always a tricky one with events if you only run one event and it's very unique and you don't have another one for 1 or 2 years, because do you really want to test in that lead period up until the event? But if you have the luxury where you have a couple of events a year, or your organization maybe has a number of events which are quite similar, certainly with, quite frankly, pretty much most of what I've said here, challenge it within your testing and try all of the different elements and see if one color works better than another, rather than register now, let's try another phrase, rather than the main headline that we've got up here, let's try another one. But certainly appreciate within the events industry, there's typically a limited opportunity to do that, especially if you, like I say, if you've only got one event and it's only running once a year, you don't really want to be doing aggressive A/B testing during the main sign-up period. I fully understand. I've come to the end of my what I wanted to cover. Do you have any other questions for me, Tom, or something else that you think we've missed?
I think there's anything to miss. The only other question I had was around your point there around A/B testing in the final stage. I'd always argue for people to be quite aggressive with the A/B testing, even if it's all systems go in terms of driving conversion. It could be so valuable. I feel like sometimes people think, "Oh, we're not going to worry this year, and we're just going to leave the A/B testing." And you're 5 years in, and that's kind of been the approach each year. I'd kind of say on that it's just so important, even if it's like very small tests. To your point, it's just ensuring that you're doing a few tests to find out some information and some learnings each time as much as possible.
That's a very valid point, actually, and sometimes even if it's a small test, because you don't necessarily have to be doing the whole page of major elements, do you? You could be doing call to action buttons, which is relatively subtle, but I don't know about you, but I've certainly seen big increases in conversions just hitting call to action buttons based on its color and the text in there. And the thing is, whilst you're doing the testing, if you see a drop off, you can stop the test, can't you? So it's but as long as they're closely monitored, yeah, I do agree with you, actually, because otherwise it's an excuse not to test, isn't it? And in actual fact, we want to make things better, don't we?
Exactly. So yeah, I think the color one is a really good one, and that's what I'd encourage people to play around with. Of which color is going to work out best. It's those little tests that aren't going to damage performance, but only bring you extra learning. Exactly. So yeah, what colors can you play with? We've seen people play around with fonts or messaging. Could it be book ticket, register now, sign up, inquire, like, you know, the actual copy of the call to action, shape of the button. God, there's so many little ones that you can play around with. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've come up to our hour. So thanks so much, Tom, for giving up your valuable time and your insights. I really appreciate it. Just in case you haven't had enough, we've got another one on the 24th of June, maximising your event budget, SEO versus PPC. So please all sign up to that. Tell all your friends, tell all your colleagues. It'll be the best yet. Not that the other two haven't been fantastic. So look forward to seeing you soon, and thanks for joining.
So thank you, John. Thanks, everyone.